Graestone Manor. We're in Gasport, New York. It's in the town of Royalton, New York. We're the little village of Gasport. The house is called Graestone Manor. It was originally built by a man named Curtis Root. He built the house back in 1865. He was a horse trainer and breeder, and he bought the property to build a big racetrack on as well, because he used to race horses here on the farm. It was a quarter-mile track that was in the field here next to the house. He raced his horses for quite a while. He used to do races up in Niagara County and the Niagara Raceway as well. And then he also owned a plantation down in Virginia. And he raced his horses down there. And he also had a race training and racehorse training school down there in Virginia. He owned an oyster farm down there too. So he would breed his horses, train them down in Virginia, and then bring the foals and the ponies up here and then race them during the warm months up in Buffalo, in this area, in Gasport. And now he ended up having 5 kids here. 6 kids, we know one child was very young when he passed. But the rest of the children, when they moved in here, he and his wife Melissa bought this house, built it, and he ended up passing away in 1889 from an accident with one of his racehorses. He was taking him into town to get supplies for the racetrack, and a train came by. It was in March, so it was a little snowy, and spooked the horse while he was walking him into town. The horse, he was trying to steady him to calm him down. The horse lost his footing, landed on Curtis Root and crushed him. So he ended up climbing back on the horse, riding him back to the house here, told his wife Melissa he was fine, but ended up he probably had internal bleeding. He ended up getting into bed, thought he was getting better, was bruised, but thought he was okay, and told his wife not to get a doctor because he thought he was okay. And he ended up passing away 2 weeks later in what's now the green room upstairs. And then his wife ended up taking over the house until about 1900 when she passed away. And in the meantime, their youngest daughter, Flora, had taken over the racehorsing business. So when Curtis passed away, it was funny that his 2 sons didn't take over, but his youngest daughter did. So she ended up taking over the horse training school down in Virginia, and then running the farm and everything up here as well for her mother. And she ended up living here until about 1923. And she ended up selling the house to the Kelkenberg and Rosman family. And then they bought the house then, and they were not racehorse people, but they were dairy farmers. So they ended up switching the farm over from racehorses into dairy cows, and they turned all the barns over into the dairy farm. And they were also farmers. So he had big farm fields of potatoes, tomatoes, everything. He had huge vegetable gardens as well, where the Roots didn't really do that stuff. Most of their stuff was for the horses. So it changed the vibe of the house a little bit. Very different family. But they also were more, I'd say, country folk, not so much the wealthy, like the Root family, very wealthy people. The Roots also were involved in politics. They were politicians. And the man on the wall behind you here is Erastus Root. That's the great-grandfather of Curtis Root. And he was friends with Thomas Jefferson. He helped write the Louisiana Purchase. He was Senator of New York for like 35 years. Very heavily involved in politics, very important figure. And then his sons, they were all involved in politics as well, and so was Curtis. But then going forward into the Kelkenberg and Rosman family living here, because they were the dairy farmers and everything, they really weren't concerned with the way the inside of the house looked. They weren't into politics and having people here and having it being a big, busy political family. They're more, hardworking. So when they bought the house from the Root family, everything was still in here. All the Victorian curtains were still hanging in the doorways, the cloth carpets, everything was still in here, and they sort of left it all in here. Nothing was ever touched. All the original wallpaper and everything was just sort of left here. And then their youngest daughter, Mina, ended up inheriting the house when their parents died in the 1950s. They both died in the house as well. They died upstairs in what's now the Gold Room. And then she ended up taking over that room with her husband when they passed away. And her husband, Dorson, he had mesothelioma and he was bedridden for many years. He ended up passing away in 1960 up in the Gold Room. Family had been here. They had come here for a seance a couple of years ago to the house here and told me all this history and brought me photos and everything of these people and told me a lot of the history. So that's how we know about, that family as well. But now, with Mina's husband having mesothelioma, he did end up passing away. He was young, he was only in his 50s. passed away in 1960, and at the same time she started going blind. Now they never had children, so they were the only people in the house. When he passed away, she was here by herself. She had glaucoma. She started losing her vision. So for the next about 40 years, she was here until about 2000. She had gone completely blind. So near the end of her life, she was in this house alone. She was blind. She had a farmhand working for her for a little while, but that was only up until about the 1970s or so, because then they were no longer farming. They couldn't really take care of this property at all. And but she didn't update anything. So when they bought the house in the 1920s from the Root family, whatever was here was here. So the electric and everything. Now at this point she was blind, so she didn't update anything in the house either. So everything was just sort of a knob and tube electric. She never had lights on. The house, everyone thought in the surrounding area, the neighborhood here, they all thought the house was abandoned because they never saw lights on. They never saw anybody at the house. Everything was overgrown. And she also was having such a hard time getting around that she was only living in this room we're sitting in now, the room next to this room here, the parlor, that little library room. She had her bed in there, moved into that room, and she was in the kitchen, and that was it. She had all these pocket doors closed so she couldn't get lost in the house, and she wanted to make sure she was only in this little area. And at that point, she still had an outhouse, and this is back in the 1980s. She still had no indoor plumbing. They had sinks in the bedrooms, but no plumbing, no toilets. So with all of this going on, neighbors found out through church that there was a lady living here, and they were horrified. They had no idea someone was actually living here because everything was so overgrown. Now Mina has relatives in the area who would come and check on her every once in a while, but she was tough. She was old school. She was like, I'm fine. You know, they would help her as much as they could, but she was still very independent and doing her own thing here. So these neighbors showed up, and they, knocked on the door. They befriended her and said, listen, we'd like to help you. We live up the road. Do you need anything? And they said it took about a month for them to gain her trust, basically, and let her into the house because they were trying to help her out. They realized she was here by herself, and they were horrified when they walked in and found how she was living because everything was just piled up, and there was garbage, and she had all these cats in the house. It was just a mess. It was just because she literally couldn't take care of anything. So they called the state in to help her out. So they brought nursing in for her, and they brought the state in, and when the state found out she was living here without a toilet, they forced her to put a toilet in. So the little room off the dining room here was actually part of the kitchen. So what they did was they put a septic tank in out there, and they actually put a toilet in, which was a hallway at the time. So they literally just put a toilet in a hallway. You had to close like 7 doors to use this bathroom because it was just, everything was all opened up at the end of it. And she was so mad that they did that because they made her, she had no money, they made her sell off a little bit of acreage to pay for this to be done. So she was so mad that they had her do that she refused to use it. She would just use a bucket still and still use the outhouse. She would use the toilet they put in for her. But also with the electric, nothing was ever updated too. No lights on still. She still was here in the dark. And then she ended up passing away in like 2000. She was very, very sick at the end, and she ended up going to hospice, and then passing away a few months later. She stayed here until she died, pretty much. She did not want to leave this house. She was very upset they made her leave. And then the house was then bought by the farm family next door. They were the ones who she sold the acreage to get the money to put the toilet in. They had an agreement that should something happen, they would have first dibs on the land. They didn't want the house. The house was falling down. It was in very bad shape at this point. They really just wanted the land. And another thing about the house, with it being in such bad shape, was that it had holes in the roof and everything. When nurses would come in and take care of Mina before she passed, they would find like raccoons and stuff sleeping in bed with her. So that's the kind of shape that the house was, just in crazy shape. So it was not worth, the farmers did not want anything to do with the house. So they had it for about a year, the house, it just sat. And then that's when the lady before me ended up purchasing it. She happened to be driving out in the country with her husband and drove by this house and said, stop the car, she said, I want that house. They had been looking for houses in this house. There's pictures of it, of what it looked like, and there's burlap over the windows were missing, there were holes in the roof. Like, this house was just absolutely in terrible shape. No paint on the house anymore, it had all worn off, it was just clapboard. So she's peeking in the windows though and saw that it looked like this inside. What you're looking at inside the house here, the woodwork was never refinished. This is the original woodwork, original medallions. Everything in here is original. This house has never been like stripped down or painted. It did have all the original wallpaper in here still, and it had like a big copper bathtub off the kitchen, so everything was bizarrely original. Even the cloth carpets were here. The green velvet drapes from when the Roots lived here, from the Victorian era, were still all hanging in the doorway. So she's like, I need that house. I need to buy this house. She was an antique dealer as well, so she knew what she was looking at. Even though the outside looked terrible, the inside was still built like a fort. I mean, the house is really solid for the age of it, you know. I always say it's because the Root family, they never had little kids here in the house. They bought the house. The youngest child was probably 4 or 5, but the youngest girl was 11. And then Mina's family, they never had children either, so there were never babies in this house. No one ever had children. So so this lady before me, she ended up finding out who owned it, bought the house, and then moved in and started trying to save it. So she did all the stuff in the house that you don't see. So she did amazing work. She put all new electric in, all new plumbing, all new roof, you know, all the stuff that you just don't see. You know, she fixed a lot of the upstairs ceilings where the raccoons had gotten in. She had hazmat crews come in and take out floorboards up in the attic where the raccoons were living, because it's toxic, so you can't have raccoons in your house with you. It's like bats. So she did so much work that was just incredible, really. And then she had windows made that were the same as the windows that would have been here, still made out of wood and everything, because she was getting the house ready to be registered for the Historic Society. And she did an amazing job. She just did incredible work in here. And the one thing she did do, though, was she said every square inch of this house is wallpapered, and she took all of the wallpaper off the walls, which sort of breaks my heart. Like, I would have framed a piece in each room just to sort of save it, but she did what she could. She took everything off the walls. Like she said, the carpets were all the cloth carpets, and they were full of bugs. Like, it was absolutely terrible. Curtains were just dry rotted and just falling apart. So she had to take all that stuff down, but the original poles are still here for the curtains, and the carpet, this leaf pattern, this is original to the Root family. We think it's from the 20s.
Okay.
It's not from the Kalkenbergs. It's I don't know what the fabric is made out of. It's a very strange fabric. Almost, it's probably like 100% asbestos, or God knows what it's really made out of. I don't know. It's very old, but it's still in really good shape. So there's definitely some original pieces, and all the plasterwork is all original. All that's all original to the house. The doors are original, things like that. So, so she was here for quite a while. Did a ton of work in here. You know, as far as the history, she was here until about 2014, and then she ended up getting transferred down to Washington. So she was in the middle of registering it. Like I told you, she had hired a detective to get all the paperwork together to get everything ready for the Historic Society. These are like wills, land deeds, anything like that, family trees. She had all this work done for the Root family. And then transferring her down to Washington, they tried to then sell the house. It still wasn't completely done, but the bank ended up taking over. They sold it 3 or 4 times, and it kept falling through. Sales kept falling through. And we're convinced, because years later we met some people a couple years ago that said they had put bids in on the house. They were going to buy the house in that interim, and the bank owned it. And the one lady said she was going to buy the house and gut the whole inside and make it a big open floor plan in here. I'm like, the spirits here would have killed her, because if we change anything in here, we get scratched, we get pushed, we have all this crazy stuff happen to us. So, you know, there's just no way we, you know, and just to touch the original stuff in here, I don't know why you would do that. But anyway, that's why it looks like a time capsule in here. I mean, you know, the lady before me knew enough to save what she could and to keep it original. You just don't see this in these old Victorians. They don't look like that. And she said the oddest part was that the wallpaper on the walls it was like 1 layer thick. So it wasn't like there was a ton of layers. Like, you know, these old houses where there's like 50 layers of paint and a ton of wallpaper. She said it wasn't. She said it was like no one ever did anything in here. It was like a brand new house. So yeah, she was here till about 2014, and then with the bank owning it. And then they finally had to just sort of give it up, because they couldn't keep coming back and forth. It was too hard trying to sell the house, so they just sort of let it go and cut their losses. And then we ended up buying it as a foreclosure. We ended up sort of stumbling upon it, and we weren't really looking for a house. It kept popping up on my phone. We weren't looking for a house at the time. We were looking, but gave up. And then the house kept popping up on my phone, and I called my friend who's a real estate agent and asked her if we could come look at it, because the pictures looked very plain, just boring pictures, nothing pretty, not the stairwell, nothing. And then she's had 2 other houses to look at that day, you know, that she had said were sort of what we were looking for. Came out to look at the house that day, walked in, was told it was sold already. The listing agent has sent her a message saying, you know, tell those guys not to look at it because it's sold. So we left. We didn't look at it. I walked into what's my office now, and walked back out because we were told it's sold. So we didn't go upstairs, didn't go in the basement, didn't go in any of these rooms or check faucets or anything. But then we didn't like the other 2 houses. And later that night, my husband said, let's just put a higher bid in, because maybe they bid low or maybe they'll accept it. And sure enough, they accepted our bid. We didn't expect that. And so the next day, they told us, hey, it's your house. We called and asked, can we come through it then? Because we really didn't get a chance to look at the house. We just bought it sight unseen. And they said, you can't because you're under contract, so you're not allowed to go back through it. So we had to sneak back over here, look in the windows. We weren't allowed to look at it until final walkthrough. And we didn't get to do that. She ended up doing it without us, so we never got to see the house till the day we moved in. And then, so I, as a psychic, never got a feel of the house or vibe of the house or read of the house. I wasn't allowed to sort of feel that energy or read it, you know. So that's where we are today, and that was in 2017. So that's when we found out. That's when we moved in. So that takes us about to where we are now. Yeah.
And then, what kind of paranormal activity do you guys have here?
Well, we had an absolute. Well, the first time we really realized something was going on was we looked at the house. We snuck over here to look in the windows because we weren't allowed to come in. So we came over here, we're on the porches, and we're looking in the windows just to see what the rooms looked like. We really wanted to see what's going on here. And we were looking in all the windows. We looked out the back of the house there. And what was odd is that my husband was looking in the back door trying to get a feel for, like, seeing through the kitchen. So he had his hands up like this on the window in the back door. And we brought, his daughter came with us and granddaughter that day to look at the house. We were checking stuff out. And he started talking to her, because she was standing next to him on his right, and she could see her legs and feet and everything. And he went and put his hands down like that, and she wasn't there. So I came around the house the other way just as he did that and said, hey, where did Karen go? His daughter Karen. Where did Karen go? And I said, they've been sitting out front. They're playing with walnuts, like they were goofing around on the little carriage step out front. They haven't been back here at all. They've been just sitting outside playing. They weren't back here at all. And he's like, he was sort of freaked out because he's a skeptic. He doesn't believe in this stuff at all. And he does now, but he does to a point. But it was really funny because he's pretty much logical. He wants a scientific, reason. He goes, oh wow. I go, why? What happened? He described what happened. He said, I think something might be going on here. And I kept going, what did you see? He said, it was legs and feet. There was, and I felt her like right here, like someone was standing right next to me. So that's when we knew something was going on. And I'm like, it's fine, because the house is so pretty. I'm like, it's good. Don't worry, So we got home that day, and he went on the computer and he started downloading the pictures he had taken, because we were taking pictures inside the windows trying to get a feel. And one of the pictures was of his daughter and granddaughter sitting on the carriage step with these bay windows to their back. And he goes, hey, look at this picture. One of the curtains in the windows was pulled open, and you can see a woman's face peeking out. You see her nose, mouth, and eye. And the house is totally empty. There was nothing in here. There was no furniture. Nothing was in this house. Curtains, that was it. There was nothing in here. And he's going, what do you think that is? An optical illusion? But it looks like a face looking at them, watching them sitting on the step. And he goes, I think something might be going on there. And I'm just like, it's fine, because it's such a pretty house, and I was trying to ignore what I was getting, but I hadn't really been in here, and I think they were trying to be good about it, because they knew if they showed themselves too soon, I think I would have been like, wait, something's wrong. Like, let's not go to the closing. Let's not close on this house. So the day we actually moved into the house, we had the whole family here, moving truck, bringing truckloads of stuff over. We probably had 35 people in the house, like all my nieces and nephews. Everybody was here. Just, you know how that is, craziness. Everybody's moving stuff around. And then they all left. And then we were here, and it was super quiet, and we were hearing talking. we're hearing what sounds like furniture being dragged across the upstairs floors, but there's carpeting up there. Sounds like furniture on a hardwood floor. We're like, what is that? We're down here. It sounded like somebody opening and closing drawers. The dresser drawer. So we go running up there, like, what the heck's going on up there? Is it the cats? Like, what's happening? You know? But the cats kept being where we were because they're all freaked out at first. We kept keeping them in like one room at a time because the cats were definitely interacting. They were like, it took them a while to warm up to the rest of the house, whatever was going on in here. So that was our first clue. There was definitely something going on. And then about a week after we were in the house, we had to have the furnace redone, you know, because the house sat for a long time. We had to have a new hot water tank put in. The furnace had to be totally cleaned out, chimney totally cleaned out. There were raccoon nests in the chimney. All this stuff had to be totally cleaned out and fixed. And like everything's dry rotted, like pipes under the sinks and stuff. And so I was going to go to work, and we were sitting down here talking, and all of a sudden we heard this explosion. It was an explosion. It was like, boom, the whole house shook. Everything rattled and shook. And we're like, oh my God, we thought it was the farm next door? Or we thought it was the furnace at first because like something blew up, like, oh my God, what is that? And we're listening for sirens. We're totally waiting for sirens because we're not smelling smoke. We run downstairs to the basement. Nothing's out of place. Everything's where it should be. And we're like, what was that? And we're looking around and not seeing anything, not hearing any sirens or anything. And, you know, I go online, I'm looking, see the same thing, like, hey, a factory blew up. So, nothing. So we're like, what was that? And then we started hearing talking, just hearing full-on conversations going on, and like, we would sit here and we would hear, it sounded like it sounded like a man and a woman talking, and then it would sound like them arguing, and it was audible, so it wasn't like we weren't recording anything. That was one of the first things we kept noticing was this weird talking, and we were moving from the suburbs of Buffalo, a little town called Tonawanda, where it's a suburb, everybody's right on top of each other, very busy. So we're used to living in a neighborhood where there's people walking their dogs by, talking. You hear your neighbors talking. You know when your neighbors are, you can touch their house next door. So we're used to hearing talking a lot, you know, just people around you. And we're like, there's nobody around us, though. Like, what is that? I think it was totally freaking us out. Those are some of the first things we definitely were hearing right off the bat. And then I started seeing people. I was seeing a lady in the kitchen. She said she was Melissa Root, wearing a Victorian era high collar, tight fitted top coat, long skirts. Her hair is up, and she was right there, and I kept seeing her, and I'm like, whoa. And then she's saying, yeah, she runs the house. She kept saying, she's like the lady of the house, older woman, and said she was Melissa Root. I'm like, okay. And this is before I even knew who lived here. I had no idea about the Root family. And then there was Curtis Root in what's now the green bedroom. We kept feeling like we were going to make that our master bedroom when we first bought the house because we were getting settled in, and then we decided to do the B&B, so we were using that as our main room. And in the green bedroom, we were like, this is a beautiful room, let's make this our master bedroom. And the minute we walked in there, we're like, ooh, there's something in here. Like, you felt like somebody was like pushing you out the door. And we're like, hey, that's weird in there. There's like and we just looked at each other and like, there's something in that room, like, doesn't want us in there. You felt like you were invading somebody's space. Very obvious that somebody was in there. So we decided to take the gold room across the hall. It seemed calmer, a little bit better, but we were definitely hearing like the closet door opening by itself and I was sleeping. There's a ghost cat in the house. All cats be sleeping on us on the bed, and I'd be like, it's a cat, because you hear meowing and then you hear it jump on the bed, and they'd already all be on the bed sleeping. And we'd hear it jump down and run across the floor or whatever, and all the cats would be still sleeping on us. We're like, yeah, so there's a ghost cat up there as well. So we started hearing strange stuff in that bedroom and walking in the hallway, lots of boot heels. And what it sounds like is hardwood floors, like boot heels on a hardwood floor. Now, I think that it's because residual of it being a farmhouse for a long time, because it seems to be about 5 in the morning, 5:30. The house definitely seems to be running on farm hours. It gets quiet around midnight, and then it starts getting active again 5:30, 6 in the morning, and when you get up to milk the cows and do whatever you have to do, right? So those are first things that we definitely noticed things were going on. And then I had my friends come over who were psychics, and we were having so many weird things happen that I'm like, inviting people over, not telling them why. I'm like, come on over, check the new house out. And I didn't tell them anything, but I'm like, but they'd be psychics, and or paranormal investigators would be like, what do you guys feel in here? Getting anything in here? And everybody would walk in and be like, there's something like on me. They felt like their memory would go. They felt like getting amnesia. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Like something was talking to them, and it would freak them out. And I'm like, I would ask them, the spirits, like, hey, back away from these people a little bit. Like, they're friends of mine. I'm inviting them over because they're friends, so you don't have to worry because it's okay if they're here because I invited them over. And they said, no, it's not up to you. It's up to us. You don't get to say who comes in here. We do. And they said, we're vetting them. We're going through their brains. We want to know why they're here. And we're seeing if it's okay that they're here. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm like,
wow.
And then someone's like, can you guys just step back a little? And they're like, no, it's not for your safety. It's for ours and for the house. It's more important than what we're doing here again, apparently. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. So, but anyway, so we had a lot of people coming and going, friends and stuff coming in, and every one of them, they would go to the same areas, same rooms, same spots. Like, ooh, there's something in here. There's a male up in here. There's a female wearing a fitted jacket, or fitted top coat, long, literally, word for word. And I'm like, that is absolutely crazy. A friend of mine who's a psychic, I actually said, she started saying, wait, I had a dream that a lady was walking me through the house, showing me the house. And she's here, I see her. And I said, don't say anything else about her. I'm going to draw a picture of who I see, when she's coming to me. And I drew her, flipped it over, and I said, okay, describe her. What do you see? And it said just what I said, the fitted gray, turn of the century clothes, with hair up. And I flipped over my paper, and she's like, oh my God, this is who I see. I'm like, yeah, that's her. Yeah, she's very, very strong. She told me all sorts of stuff here too. She told me there was sidewalks buried under the grass. The first spring we were here, she said she demanded that I dig up the grass because there's a curved walkway out there. And I said, really? And she's like, dig right here. And I'm like, it's cold out. No. She said, dig. So she made me dig, and sure enough, I'm like, clink, I hear concrete. I'm like, whoa. And sure enough, so we dug out all those sidewalks out there. They were all overgrown, the sod grows over. So she did a couple things like that where she's like, you need to fix this, put this up there, put this wall back up there, and come to find out later, yeah, there was a wall there. Yes, these things were there. Really wanted the stuff put back to how it's supposed to be, basically, And we had my brother-in-law, one of the first people who was sort of affected here, in I guess a negative way, but it was definitely bizarre, was my husband's brother came by to visit when we first moved in. And he kept saying, it's a nice place, but we should get a bulldozer out here and knock it down and put a double wide here. Like, he's kidding around, but he kept saying he wanted to knock the house down and do all this other stuff and literally put a trailer here. And they were messing with him. When he went to go home, he lives a couple hours away. And he had been here multiple times. He used to work in the area, so he knows this area. So this isn't foreign to him. He said he sat in his car for about 10 minutes and couldn't remember how to get home. He had complete amnesia, couldn't remember anything. And right before he went to get in his car, when he was leaving here that day, I wasn't here, my husband was here with him, he kept saying, I forgot something, I can't remember, I can't find my phone, I can't find my whatever. He had put his phone and keys and stuff down on the table in the kitchen. He had dropped some stuff off. And they both knew that they were in the kitchen. It was raining, it was sort of cruddy out, so they had not gone back out to the truck. They knew everything was in the kitchen. And he kept saying, I can't find my keys, can't find my keys. So they're looking all over the place. They finally go back out to the truck, and my husband went to put something in the backseat of the truck, and he moved his hat that was in the backseat of the truck, and his keys and phone were under his hat.
Wow.
And he had not gone out there. So he's like, what the hell? So that was right before he goes to leave, and then he gets this weird amnesia thing happen. He sat there for 10 minutes trying to remember. He couldn't remember if he had to go right or left. Couldn't remember how to even go home. Took a stab in the dark, went left. Started driving about 15 minutes and called his wife and said, I think something's happened to me. I can't remember how to get home. He's like, I have no idea where I am. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just randomly driving. She's like, it sounds like you're having a stroke or something's going on. You should pull over and call 911. Don't drive anymore. Just pull over. And he's like, I think I'm going the right direction. He's going. He was telling her the route numbers he's seeing, and she's saying, yeah, that's the right way. Keep going, but you should pull over. And she was really obviously worried about him. And he said the closer he got to his house, his memory kept coming back a little clearer. By the time he pulled in the driveway, he was fine. Felt like nothing at all. And then he went to the doctors the next day, took an MRI. They thought he had a stroke. No explanation for it. This guy is a hunter. He's a military guy. He's tracking in the woods, forever. Does not get lost, And they said, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you at all. So they mess with your memory. They mess with your thinking. They absolutely do. So that's just the very tip of the iceberg. That's just some basic. And then about 6 months later, after we moved in, all the stuff was happening. People were having many experiences. I finally got in touch with the lady who owned the house before us, because a girl had come here and said, hey, I grew up with the kids who used to live here, and we had a lot of experiences. We used to have sleepovers and stuff here, and all sorts of stuff would happen to us when we'd be here in the house. And I said, hey, can you put me in touch with her, because I would love to compare notes. I want to see if she ever had anything happen to her. And sure enough, I called her, and I said, did you guys ever have any paranormal things happen to you in the house? And she just started laughing. She laughed for like 10 minutes. She's like, oh my God. She's like, that's probably the reason we left. She's like, she was pushed down the stairs. She had a black shadow figure hold her down and forced her to have miscarriages. She miscarried like a bunch of children here by this black shadow man. Kids were thrown against the door in the back room. She was having all sorts of things, just wild interactions, hearing things, laughing. The kids were being chased by this lady they call the wild laughing lady up in the hallway that would chase them down the back stairs and make them fall. They saw a man in the back room here. Everything was just lining up with what we were experiencing and seeing here in the house. We're like, yeah, we were seeing all these people as well. Kept seeing a man out in the fields walking away from the house. Dark pants, white shirt, dark hair, walking towards the fields that way. And she's like, yeah, we think his name is John, because kids kept saying there's a man named John who's dating one of the girls who used to work here, and these are the little kids telling her this stuff. And then looking it up in the census and everything, yes, sure enough, they had all these Irish indentured servants that lived here. The one girl named Bridget White lived here, and her boyfriend John worked for the rest of the Root family that lived up the road, and they used to walk back and forth all the time. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm seeing him walking. It's just craziness. And yeah, everything she said, she's like, have you heard the explosions yet? And we're like, yeah, we've heard them like 3 or 4 times. And she's like, yeah, we never could figure that out. No explanation. She goes, have you heard the bells in the walls yet? And we're like, yes, they seem like they're coming out of that library room. She's like, we think they're servant bells, call bells for the maids back in the day, but we can't find them. She said they could never figure out where they were coming from. You hear this tinkling bell sound. But everything, she's like, well, at least they're not up to any new tricks. She's going, they're doing the same stuff they were when here. But she was doing a lot of stuff. She dug up all the floors. She took the walls apart. She was taking all the wallpaper down. They probably thought she was destroying stuff, but she was actually preserving it. But they were attacking her because, in their eyes, she was changing the house for the first time ever since 1865, and this is in the year 2000. She was changing things first, and so she definitely was being attacked. There were a lot of graves out back, and she dug one up. She thought they were the racehorse graves, horses' graves, so she dug one up and had it in the living room as a decoration the whole time she lived here, and that stirred up all kinds of craziness here in the house. She, I talked to her about
she had the dead horse in here or the gravestone?
the gravestone.
Okay, I was
Not
gonna
the
say.
horse.
Oh my God,
No,
that is
horse.
not a decoration.
It would be a terrible decoration except for Halloween time. Yeah, no, she took one of the tombstones that said "Our Ben" on it, and she had it here. And when we moved in, I said, I said I don't see that tombstone anywhere here, and she said no, she took it to her house with her. She actually has that at her house. She sent me a photo of it. But I compared the tombstone that she took, and I compared it to the Root family plot where Curtis and Flora and Melissa are buried over in Royalton Center Cemetery, which is about a mile from here, and it matches. It's the same shape, style, lettering. So when she had the historian do the family tree for the Roots, they even told her there's a couple of kids missing off that family tree because they only lived to be a certain age. If they didn't live to be past whatever childhood, they didn't make it on the family tree because they were like 3, 4 or whatever. And then Melissa Root, the spirit of Melissa Root, the ghost, is telling me, yes, he was like 3. He was buried by the tree out there, because she wanted to be able to see him every day and talk to him. She did not want him in the Royalton Center Cemetery, where none of them were buried yet because they were still alive. She wanted to bury him on the property where she could see him.
So it was actually the gravestone of a child, not a racehorse. Okay.
Right, and also
yeah, that would definitely stir up lots of activity.
And her one son, the one younger son, said that what we turned into the child's room. Ironically, we just did that because it was a smaller room and we had a lot of kids. At the time, we had some dolls and kid stuff, and I wanted to put everything in one spot. And she said that there's a boy in the closet in their spirit. They call it the vortex room. People get very dizzy in there. But there's a boy that comes out of that closet and kept wanting to play with him. And he looked about 3 or 4 years old. He said he was little at the time. And she was painting the living room down here. And she said that he went and pointed at the paint can. It was a Dutch boy paint can with the Dutch boy with the Dutch boy head. And said, "Hey, that's the kid that's in my room." So that's what he was describing him looking like. He had that page boy sort of haircut. Sort of old-timey, but very, very odd. I mean, just the stuff that she experienced here and the kids. One of her daughters actually came back because I kept saying to her, "I don't see these tombstones." She kept saying, "Yeah, all the graves are out back," and I'm like, "We're not seeing tombstones." She warned me. She said, "Just be careful when you're mowing the lawn with the riding lawnmower. Don't hit the tombstones because they're sticking up out of the ground. A lot of them are flat ones. They have a lot of writing on. You flip them over writing." And they're sticking up out of the ground a little bit. Some are actual tombstones are sticking up out of the ground. And then the man who owned the farmland around us warned us the same thing. So just be careful, don't hit the tombstones. They're out in that patch of grass right by the tree there. So we moved here, we did not see that. And I've looked, we really haven't gone and dug or sort of tried to upset the soil. We should really get a pole and try and see if we can find them. I think that the bank might have moved them because they were trying to sell the house. It had been in foreclosure for 4 years. People were freaked out because they pulled the driveway and there's a bunch of tombstones there. And people were not, people don't want that. So I think they may have moved them, the tombstones. But then she also said, "Hey, there's more in the tall grass in the back." So that's what we uncovered. Where she pointed to us as a big bunch of overgrowth. This section that's a little further back from the other area. She was all confused. Her daughter came to stay with us with her fiance 2 summers ago, and because she's being really funny, she's really cute. She's like, "I'll show you where the tombstones are. I'll show you some other stuff that we found on the property. I'll point the stuff out to you guys." So when she got here, she was all confused. She kept walking around, going, "They should be right here." She kept circling, going, "They're right here. This is where the graves were." Then she said, "There's more here." So that area was overgrown. When she left, we dug it all out, took all the vines, and there were 10 trees in there, and sure enough, as we unburied stuff, we were finding tombstones. We found more there, but not the original one she talked about as well. 2 different spots. So it's pretty wild, pretty crazy. So that's just some stuff. And then since we've lived here now 3.5 years, 3 years now, but it's been crazy. Just the interaction with people. They seem very they like when people come by to visit. They're very interactive. They're very intelligent haunting. They'll answer questions, they're, in real time. Even though I think there's some residual stuff going on, I think there's definitely some very intelligent haunting as well. They seem to know what's going on, who's here and why.
Okay.